announced into Bhagavad Gita, and we have handouts for, hopefully, for everyone, and someone can help us to distribute those around. And because we're going to be going through the entire Bhagavad Gita, and I'll tell you briefly what's going to be happening. It's going to be 1.5 hours, but we'll go through all 18 chapters at a glance. Plus, we're going to be looking into 12 key verses, special verses, which will serve as keys to, make complete sense of Bhagavad Gita. And plus, we're going to be discussing 5 points, which are general points for understanding Bhagavad Gita. So you can understand that 18 plus 12 plus 5, it's 35 points in 1.5 hours. It's like 2 minutes per point, including a chapter. Chapter is also counted as a point. So, and verse, right? To talk about a verse or to talk about a chapter, I only have 2 to 3 minutes max. So, and we won't have time to elaborate on things, but I'm sure you'll hear a lot of interesting things for yourself. And so far I've done since 2000. Yeah, I'm doing that crash course since 2005, since I've done it for the first time in Durban, South Africa. And of course, it was done in many countries, more than 20 countries, on 4 continents. And so far, like many, not only Bhakti Shastri students, but Bhakti Shastri teachers took it as well. And so far, I haven't come across one single person, whether student or teacher, who said they were aware of every single point presented. And all of them, they mentioned more than one point which we never came across before, even though these points are right in Bhagavad Gita. And so, the course is based on Bhagavad Gita as it is. We're not going to go off into like commentaries of acharyas, this and that, some additional material. We'll just base it on Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. And I think you'll be surprised how much is in there if you look carefully. And we'll be also speaking not only about understanding but application of Bhagavad Gita, which is the most important thing. And the training courses based on different sections of Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, which I also teach, Yoga of Success, Yoga of Love, and Yoga of Wisdom. They're based on that original crash course I did, because devotees, they wanted me to, introduce the application in practical ways, how to do it, etc. So anyway, many points we'll be going through. They will be on slides, and they're going to be in your handouts. So you don't have to write down every single point. You don't have to write down what's already in your handouts. But the points which are not in your handouts, and elaborations, of course, they are not in your handouts. So elaborations, you can take notes. And certain points which are absolutely not there, you can also, note references for yourself. Yeah. Okay, so before we start our journey right into Bhagavad Gita, we'll offer our prayers of respect to the spiritual master, Vaishnavas, and the Supreme Lord in a shortened form. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalokaya Chakshurmilitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dadati Svaparantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So everyone can see these thoughts, yeah? Okay. So Bhagavad Gita as it is, ki jai. So Prabhupada ki jai. So before we look into Bhagavad Gita, even introduction, first we need to understand what's happening here now, because Bhagavad Gita 1870 tells us, and this is not in your handouts, you may take a note of that, Adhyashyate chaya imam dharmyam sambadhamavayo gyanayagena tanaham ishtasamiti me mati. And I declare that he who studies this sacred conversation of ours worships me by his intelligence. So, we are studying Bhagavad Gita here. This is what this sacred conversation is about. And Shri Krishna says that we are worshipping him through intelligence, but if you want to understand deeper this statement, you can look at the third line of the Sanskrit. It says Jnana Yagyena. Jnana is knowledge, and Yagyena is coming from the word Yagya, which means sacrifice. So we are performing sacrifice here for the sake of obtaining knowledge. And normally when we think about the sacrifice, we think about, certain ritual like fire sacrifice, for example. There is no fire here, there is no priest, there are no grains in the fire and all these things. That's not there. So how is it a sacrifice? What does it mean? But if we think about it carefully, it's a sacrifice as a principle because, for example, you could be doing so many other things now in your spare time, but you sacrifice your time, and you sacrifice your attention for the sake of attaining transcendental knowledge. So, in principle, it is a sacrifice, and this is a very important point to understand Bhagavad Gita, that sacrifice is not just a mere religious ritual. It's a governing principle in human life. And, it takes so many shapes and forms. Okay? So, now, looking at the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains that there are 5 main topics in Bhagavad Gita. I'm sure many of you are familiar with those. These are in your handouts, you don't have to write this down. Karma, Kala, Ishvara, Jiva and Prakriti, action, time, controller, soul and nature. Anyone has an idea why have we divided these 5 into 2 categories through use of different colors?
They are not that temporary, karma and time. They are not eternal.
Well, it's not because of that. So Prabhupada says that karma is temporary, but kala, time as principle, is eternal, even though, of course, past and future is temporary. But as principle, time is also eternal. It's not because of that. It is divided into 2 categories because Ishvara, Jiva and Prakriti are the key personalities who have relationship with each other, right? Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Prakriti, nature, and Jiva, soul. these are three personalities, we can say, which are eternally connected, and the connection points between these three are kala and karma. And to understand how is that happening, there is a small diagram that's not in the handouts, you can copy this one. Ishvara, Krishna, he is blue, that's why the word is in blue color as well. He is on the top, and he is influencing both us, jivas, and prakriti, nature. You can see that we are under the control of time in this world, as well as things are under control of time in this world, right? Everything becomes old after some time. And so time is the controlling factor. So time is representing the Supreme Lord. And how Jiva and Prakriti are connected with each other? Through karma. We are acting and Prakriti is reacting. So that's the law of karma. According to our activity, Prakriti is giving us the fruits of our activity. So, is that clear? Shall we move on? Yeah? Okay, so looking at the contents of Bhagavad Gita, we can see that Bhagavad Gita is consisting of 18 chapters, and these 18 chapters are divided into three main parts. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these divisions. That first 6 chapters are dedicated to Karma Yoga, middle 6 chapters to Bhakti Yoga, and last 6 chapters to Jnana Yoga, right? That's pretty basic understanding, but anyway. That's important points to note in regards to Bhagavad Gita as a whole. We made a little Bhagavad Gita counter. You have it in your handouts. You don't have to copy it for yourself. And so, from 1 to 5. If you remember 5 points, you can explain to any layman what Bhagavad Gita is in 5 minutes maximum. So 1 stands for one scripture, special scripture, spoken by the Supreme One. Srimad Bhagavad Gita is that special scripture which is spoken by the Supreme Lord Himself. Other scriptures, they speak about God, but there is no other scripture in any other world religious tradition which is spoken by God in the first person. That's Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita itself, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita states that He is the Supreme Lord. For example, in chapter 10, verse 8, as well as in a number of other places. And so far, no one in the history of humankind was able to refute the point that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. No matter how hard people tried, whether philosophically or even physically, to remove Krishna from his supreme position, he is still there. And so, 2. We can ask, what is Bhagavad Gita? Okay, it's a special scripture which is spoken by the Supreme One. So what is Bhagavad Gita? And Bhagavad Gita is explaining relationship between the two. It's a conversation between the two friends sitting in the same chariot. Analogy is given 2 birds sitting on the branches of the same tree. I'm sure many of you came across that one. 2 souls in the same body. One dependent and one supreme. Soul and super soul. And so Krishna is representing the Supreme Lord, super soul, and Arjuna is representing the individual soul. And they are eternally connected or linked to each other. What do we call the word? What is the Sanskrit word for connection or link? Yoga. So Bhagavad Gita is Yoga Shastra, Yoga scriptures. Yoga scripture, even though it Bhagavad Gita is Yoga scripture because it speaks about principles of yoga, even though there are no yoga postures in Bhagavad Gita described, right? So there are principles of yoga and there are details. And what are the 3 principal subdivisions of yoga? Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Yeah? And so, now, yes, Bhagavad Gita is very special, it describes yoga, but then we may ask ourselves, why do I need to study Bhagavad Gita? Is there is there any benefit for me? Because whatever we want to know, is there anything I can benefit from? And yes, there are many benefits, and for example, the very last verse of Bhagavad Gita mentions four benefits coming from applying Bhagavad Gita in your life. And these four benefits listed Shri Vijayo Bhuti Niti. And so they can be translated as opulence, success, because victory means success, synonymous, and influence, extraordinary power, and morality. So these are four benefits listed in just one verse of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is offering us many, many benefits. And of course, everybody wants to be rich, everybody wants to be successful, everybody wants to be influential, have high power, a high position in this society. But how do you attain all these things? What is the main ingredient for that? Morality, niti. That's the main. And this reference is not in your handout, so you might take a note for yourself. Krishna says in chapter 10, text 38, Nitir asmi jigishatam. I am morality of those who are striving for victory. So if we want to be successful, then as Prabhupada, not Prabhupada, but anyway, at least this quote is attributed to Prabhupada. We learned that he never used the same words, but the principle is there. Purity is the force. Yeah? So in order to really be successful, we have to be pure. We can achieve some success by impure, dubious means, but it's going to be very short-term success, right? But if we want to achieve real one, then purity is the force. And then point number 5 is 5 main topics of Bhagavad Gita, which we already looked into: karma, kalnishvara, jiva, and prakriti, right? So now these are general points. Now we are moving into the most important thing, which is how Bhagavad Gita is applicable in our lives. Because we may say, oh, Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago, completely different circumstances, was spoken to the member of royal dynasty, Prince Arjuna. I'm not from royal dynasty, I'm not on the battlefield, and the most popular objection is, of course, that, okay, Arjuna was guided by the Supreme Lord himself. What about little me in Sydney? The Supreme Lord is somewhere, I don't know, playing his flute with his eternal associates, and I'm here struggling alone. But this is not a reality. What is the reality? That's described in that purport. You can also take a note, a reference note for yourself. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.9.21 in the purport. So Prabhupada explains, he, Sri Krishna, is Paramatma, or the Super Soul present in everyone, as the supreme guidance, and therefore he is already the chariot driver and counsel of all living beings, including us. When he therefore exhibits himself as chariot driver of Arjuna, there is no change in his exalted position. It's the power of devotional service only that demonstrates him as the chariot driver or the messenger. So it's very revealing purport. Basically speaking, we are in exactly the same position as Arjuna 5,000 years ago. He was sitting on the chariot. We're also sitting on the chariot. What is the chariot? Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridaya Arjuna Tishtati. Krishna says, I'm the... that every living entity is sitting in the chariot of the material body. And so who is sitting next to us? Exactly same Krishna. Super Soul is no different from Krishna. No difference at all. It's only functional difference. And in order to help us understand how Krishna in person is different from the Super Soul, the difference is exactly the same as you see and you talk with your friend in person, or you talk to your friend on a mobile phone. That's it. Super Soul is just you talk to Krishna on the, whatever, using some connection line, spiritual connection line. But it can also be video. Prabhupada says that if our hearts are sufficiently purified, we can also turn on the video mode on that phone. So there is no difference between Super Soul and Krishna. Yeah? And so exactly same Krishna is sitting next to us in the chariot of our body. And why he is sitting next to us? For exactly the same reason he was sitting next to Arjuna, to guide and counsel. And it's only our choice whether we will turn to Krishna and listen to his counsel and advice, or we turn our face away and we'll try to, do our own thing. And so, focusing on Bhagavad Gita, of course, is helping us to turn our face back to Krishna and listen to what Krishna says and doing what Krishna says. Take his guidance, take his instructions. And Bhagavad Gita is meant for that, and Guru is meant for that, and Vaishnavas are meant for that, just to train us to turn and focus on Krishna. And Hare Krishna Mahamantra, of course, is meant for that also. Yeah, this is the Super Soul sitting in everyone's heart, actually standing in the heart, as Prabhupada says. You know the history of this picture, that Jadurani was originally painting this picture, and she didn't know how Super Soul looks, and she was asking Srila Prabhupada how the Super Soul looks, and how do I know how the Super Soul looks? And Prabhupada said, oh, it's very simple, you just go to Himalayas, and you absorb yourself in meditation for 10,000 years, that will see. And she became a little bit, like disturbed by that. And then Prabhupada said, okay, by the mercy of spiritual master, you don't need to do that. I'll describe to you how Super Soul looks, you can just paint. And, so he described that Super Soul standing there, this is how it's happening. So Prabhupada ki jai. Now, opening Bhagavad Gita. And normally when you take a book from the bookshelf, say the shop, you never seen the book, and you want to know what the book is about, normally you just look at the cover, front and back cover, trying to make out what the book is about. So we can start Bhagavad Gita by looking at the front and back verse of Bhagavad Gita and comparing them to one another and trying to make sense what Bhagavad Gita is about. So the first verse of Bhagavad Gita is Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya about the position in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, very famous verse, and let's chant it all together in unison. Dhritarashtra vacha
dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta mama pandava shaiva kim akurvata Sanjaya.
Dhritarashtra said to Sanjaya, after my son, the son of Pandava, assembled in the place of pilgrimage in Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? So it's very tense question posed by King Dhritarashtra, that's why the translation is in red. Because he's really worried. And, it looks like a simple question from the first side, but actually, if you think about it, it's a strange question. I mean, Pandavas and Kauravas assembled at the Kurukshetra desiring to fight, and then what did they do? Prabhupada says it's as strange as, say, if you invite some hungry man to your house and you put him and you sit him down and you put so many wonderful preparations in front of that man, and before he reaches out to the preparation, you will ask, so what are you going to do now? So naturally, hungry man will eat, and soldiers desiring to fight will fight. So why Dhritarashtra is asking this meaningless question? But then, sometimes people, and this is one of the laws of psychology, if they have malicious intentions, they don't want to ask what they really want directly. They want to conceal their intentions by asking indirect question, and I mean, Dhritarashtra has very malicious intentions. You can make out from the verse he says, my sons and sons of Pandu. Immediately he just separates, even though these are orphans and he's supposed to be there, caretaker and guardian, but he says these Pandus and my sons. He's very malicious in his intentions. And what he really wants to know, the real question is, are there any chances for victory for my sons? Right? This is a very intense question. And after speaking the entire Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya answers directly to this indirect question. And this is the last verse of Bhagavad Gita. Let's chant it in unison as well. Yatra
Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Bhata Tanuttara Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir Prabhuvaniti Mahirmama.
Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. So shortly, I'm sorry, my dear king, but there will be no victory for you. There is Krishna and Arjuna on the other side. So, very clear. And now, yes, that Krishna didn't even have to fight. He just had to be with Arjuna to ensure his victory. And now we'll be looking through all 18 chapters in Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell. An idea is, and this is the very important part as well, the idea is that you firstly understand the most essential message of each chapter, and secondly, understand how the chapters are connected to each other and the logic behind the structure of Bhagavad Gita as a whole. And there is a purpose why we compare, and that's in your handouts, the whole table is in your handouts. And so there is a reason why we compare Sanskrit titles with English titles. Because Sanskrit titles will give you a better idea where Srila Prabhupada is coming from by translating the titles the way he did. And so, chapter 1, in Sanskrit it's Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And you know who is Arjuna, you know what is yoga. By the way, interesting that every single chapter in Bhagavad Gita is yoga. Also shows that it's a yoga shastra. And yoga is much more than a physical exercise. And luckily, nowadays, yoga practitioners show more and more interest in studying Bhagavad Gita, so we can capitalize on that. And yeah, by the way, if you want to run this crash course for any of the yoga school, you're very welcome. No copyrights. You can take the materials and use them as you like. And so, we know who is Arjuna, we know what is yoga. What is Vishada? Sorrow, lamentation, grief, all these kind of things. And yeah, it's a very interesting kind of yoga. Yoga of sorrow. Yoga of lamentation. Nowadays there are so many different types of yoga. Raja yoga, Hatha yoga, Moksha yoga, this yoga, that yoga. Maybe we should introduce one more. Vishada yoga. Because people lament all the time anyway. At least they can derive some yoga benefit from it. I think we can become best professionals running courses on Vishada yoga. Anyway, apart from jokes, Arjuna was lamenting, and we know why Arjuna was lamenting. We know when Arjuna was lamenting, when he was observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This is where Prabhupada is coming from. That this is the cause of his lamentation, because he realized that he had to fight and kill his friends and relatives, very near and dear ones. But still it is yoga. Why it is yoga? Because he was connected to Krishna, even in his grief. Even in the worst situation in his life, he was safe. Why? Because Krishna was there next to him, and Krishna would dispel his lamentation. But Arjuna is giving different reasons. I'm sure that many of you learned the reasons why Arjuna didn't want to fight. What was the main reason? What was the real reason why Arjuna didn't want to fight? What was the prime reason?
Body concept.
What was the concept?
Sins.
No, that was not. That was secondary.
Attachment.
That was also secondary.
Compassion.
Compassion. Kripaya paradishta. It is mentioned straight away in Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna was overwhelmed with compassion by seeing, and even though that it is coming from body concept and all these things, but still it is interesting to note that Srila Prabhupada glorifies Arjuna's compassion in number of purposes in the first chapter. So much so that in the end, anyone has copy of Bhagavad Gita? Thank you. In the end of the chapter, in the purport to the very last verse of chapter 1, he says to that effect, and please listen carefully, this is the very last sentence of the purport. Such a kind and soft-hearted person in the devotional service of the Lord is fit to receive self-knowledge. I'll read it to you again. Such a kind and soft-hearted person in the devotional service of the Lord is fit to receive the self-knowledge. So we can understand that kindness of Arjuna and soft-heartedness of Arjuna made him qualified to understand the message of Bhagavad Gita, because this is what self-knowledge means. This is Bhagavad Gita. And so we can understand that this is the primary qualification, compassion, to understand Bhagavad Gita. Because Arjuna, he had zero reasons to fight. He didn't want to fight. But after he became convinced by Krishna, he started fighting without looking for any results for himself. Right? He was detached from the fight, from the idea of fighting from the beginning. But then Krishna said, it's okay, you want nothing for yourself? Good, do it for me. There were so many people willing, desiring to fight. They were eager to fight. There were so many warriors on both sides. In fact, 640 million people died, right, in 18 days of the fight. So this is how many warriors were assembled at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And Krishna was not in any way, shape or form short of choice. Right? He could choose anybody and empower them and execute his will. After all, his idea was to gather all these demons in one place. That's another subject. And, wholesale slaughter them. That was his plan. Yeah, because from the beginning of his life, from his childhood, that was his secondary mission, but still it was a serious mission. And then he started, from his childhood, he started killing all these demons, one after another, when they were coming to him down. But then, he was working hard. Every day he was killing few demons. And, when he reached his teens, he realized, oh my God, it's not really working. I have to figure out something else. Then, he organized this whole big plan how to gather them all in one place at Kurukshetra and finish them. But then Arjuna is supposed to be like the major player. And then Arjuna says, oh no, these are good people. And we can imagine, how frustrated we would be. We would be in the position, right? But Krishna doesn't become frustrated with Arjuna. Krishna just takes time to explain to Arjuna. And takes a good hour or so, to speak the whole Bhagavad Gita. It took time. Why Krishna bothered? He could take anybody else. He could say Yudhishthir, just let Arjuna go anywhere he wants. You take it up. You become commander, or whoever, Bhima, or anyone. There were so many devotees, right? But why Krishna have chosen to still spend time with Arjuna? Because Arjuna was the most compassionate. And so that was the sign that he was the most qualified to receive and understand Bhagavad Gita. From the start, Arjuna was selfless. He was not looking for anything. From the battle, he didn't even want to fight. But then Krishna thought, okay, he wants 0 for himself, then that means he will give 100% to me. So let me empower him. And so this is the significance of the first chapter. And plus Arjuna was open and he was willing to listen. And then in the second chapter, Krishna is explaining the entire Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell. Sanskrit is Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya means to count in Sanskrit. So this is where the titles coming from, English title, contents of the Gita summaries. All the topics of Bhagavad Gita accounted for in the second chapter in a nutshell. And it's very interesting from this standpoint to look at the whole structure of Bhagavad Gita. For example, in modern academic circles, it's believed that the best way to explain any subject is to explain it 3 times. First, you say what you want to talk about in a nutshell, introduce the topic, then elaborate, and then at the end highlight the main points. And then Krishna is doing exactly the same thing. This is how he presents Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is amazingly structured literature. Sankhya Yoga is Krishna is speaking what he wants to speak about in a nutshell, then elaborates from chapters 3 to 17, then chapter 18 highlights the main points. You will see that, for example, out of 3 half verses repeated verbatim in Bhagavad Gita, 2 coming in chapter 18. 2 out of 3. So that shows that chapter 18 highlights the main points. And then chapter 3, from this chapter onwards, Krishna starts elaborating on the subject of Bhagavad Gita. And so he starts elaborating on the subject of Karma Yoga. That's why the chapter is called Karma Yoga. And Prabhupada doesn't even give any English translation, just leaves it as it is. And what is the meaning of Karma Yoga? We understand what karma is. That's activity, action and reaction, and yoga means connection. So how to connect all your activity and all the results to Krishna. That's the idea of the chapter. And what is the essence of the chapter? One main point is highlighted throughout. Sacrifice. Again. So Krishna starts with sacrifice, explaining that the sacrifice is the main thing we should live for. And of course, in terms of Arjuna, it's a serious sacrifice, because this sacrifice involves sacrificing, it's human sacrifice. It involves sacrificing his own relatives. That's a serious sacrifice. Right? Just imagine if you will be placed in front of such a choice. You can well understand Arjuna's predicament quite well. And of course, he had to do that because he was in a very different position from any ordinary human being. Because for a king, he cannot indulge in what Prabhupada's calling nepotism. I think you all understand the term. Nepotism means taking sides or favoring someone against someone else. King cannot do that. Ruler cannot do that. He cannot say, oh, this is my family member, he can do any damn thing and he'll be excused. And this person is not my family member, I don't care. That's very wrong mentality for a king. King has to be just and what we call it? Yeah, equal towards everybody. And so Arjuna had to kill his own relatives because they committed many criminal activities and they went against the Dharma, so he had to do that. That was his duty. But it was very hard duty to perform, you can understand. And so, again, coming to the point of application of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, of course, he was in the position of Kshatriya, so he had to kill his own relatives for the sake of everyone's benefit and advancement in Krishna consciousness. So now, okay, we are not Kshatriyas, but what about ourselves? And that's a tricky question to ask yourself. Do we have any relatives we have to kill? If we are to apply Bhagavad Gita as it is, are there any relatives we must kill without showing any mercy? Yes. What are the relatives?
Mind. Or mind.
Bad quality.
You think the mind, okay, we should be mindless.
Bad quality.
Yes. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. There are so many relatives. These relatives are much closer to our heart than physical relatives. Because physical relatives are with us only in this lifetime. But these guys are following us from one life into another. For many lifetimes we're, related to these bad qualities. And so, we have to, kill these bad qualities in our own heart. So this is our Kurukshetra, first Kurukshetra. Destroy the things we are related to. We are identifying ourselves with these bad qualities. And yes, what is the method? It's a sacrifice. Yeah. And so yes, Krishna is very emphatic, explicit in what he wants Arjuna to do. Immediately he tells Arjuna what he is looking for in Bhagavad Gita, and that's text number 30. We'll look into this a little later. So he tells him he has to fight by giving up lethargy and selfishness. And then in chapter 4 is called Jnana Yoga, transcendental knowledge. The essence of this chapter is benefit from sacrifice. Firstly, it explains that sacrifice can take different form according to the position and according to the performer. Like for example, Krishna says that brahmacharis or students, they sacrifice hearing process. And grihastas, they sacrifice the objects of sense gratification, etc. So sacrifice will be different according to the person, according to the position, but the principle remains the same. What is the principle of sacrifice? Whatever, sacrifice is a basic principle is to sacrifice your selfish interests for the sake of higher goal. And of course, the highest sacrifice is for the satisfaction of activity, for the satisfaction of Krishna, the Supreme Lord. So yes, the selflessness is very much connected to sacrifice, idea of sacrifice. And yes, if we do that, whatever we attach to, whatever we like, we use it for pleasing Krishna, for the benefit of others. What is in there for me? What am I get? What will I get? Transcendental knowledge. We become realized. If we do it like that, we'll become wise people. We'll understand things which not many people understand. And even in the material world, know-how is the most expensive product. And so yes, jnana yoga, divine knowledge, transcendental knowledge. This is the first benefit of coming from sacrifice. Then chapter 5. Chapter 5 is sannyasa yoga. We know what sannyas means, but it's interesting how Prabhupada translated that. He says it's karma yoga, action in Krishna consciousness. So he explains what renunciation is. Because many times there is a wrong idea of renunciation. Everyone has this wrong idea of renunciation, including Arjuna. Arjuna was thinking, yes, renunciation means I renounce from my position of a warrior and I go into the forest. I basically take care of my spiritual life in that situation. I don't need this material activity. It's interesting, by the way, that even though Bhagavad Gita is considered to be a scripture, religious scripture, it was not spoken to a priest, and it doesn't even talk about like religious procedures or whatever. They're just talking about fighting. So yeah, this is the principle that yes, you renounce. Every one of us have to renounce, but not just renounce foolishly. Renounce in favor of the Supreme Lord. Not just give up, but give it to. This is the real renunciation. Give it to the Supreme Lord. Use it for the Supreme Lord. And so this renunciation means renunciation in action. This is what it means. Real renunciation is in action. You work as if you want to gain the best possible results for yourself. You work like that and even harder. But then the results you use for Krishna's pleasure. That's sannyas yoga. That's the idea. But then again, I work so hard, and then everything I have, I use for Krishna. Then what's in there for me? What do I gain? What is the main key message of the chapter 5? What is the gain which comes from selfless activity for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord? Anartha nivritti. Purification of the heart. Our heart will become pure. There are so many verses in chapter 5 talking about purification of the heart. Yeah? Kama krodha vimuktanam, etc. Okay, then I may ask, why do I need to purify my heart? Anything wrong? My heart seems to be pure enough. But then, even from mundane point of view, they say that the impurities in the heart, they cause all the heart diseases. So even materially, we have to make sure that our heart is pure. But of course, we're not talking about physical purification of the heart. We're talking about spiritual purification, becoming free from all these bad qualities, such as greed and lust and anger and all. And why do we need to purify our hearts? Because the Supreme Lord is residing in the heart. And this is what chapter 6 is talking about. Dhyana yoga. Dhyana means what? Meditation. Meditation upon whom? Krishna in the heart. So that what chapter 6 is describing. And why do we meditate on the Paramatma in the heart? Because, not just because, we want to be recognized as accomplished meditators or something, receive a diploma or something. Okay? I reached Paramatma. And then go around and brag that I'm connected to Paramatma. But we want to connect with Paramatma, and this comes back to the application we spoke earlier. We want to connect with Paramatma. Why? Any one of you wants to be connected with Paramatma in the heart? Please raise your hands if you do. Okay. Can anyone explain why do you want to be connected with Paramatma?
So that He can guide us.
Huh?
So that He can guide us.
Yes, exactly. That we want to be guided in our life. We want to do only what Krishna wants us to do, right? Perfectly follow every single desire and Lord's command. This is why we want to be connected with the Lord. So for that connection, to establish that connection, your communication channel, your connection channel has to be clear, right? And so what are the things which obstruct the connection? That's, yeah, all these bad qualities. That's why if we purify our hearts by selfless activity for the pleasure of the Supreme, then our communication channel will be open and we can start real devotional service from this point onwards, when we'll be really guided at every step, at every second in our lives. This is what we're striving for, and that's why this chapter ends the Karma Yoga part of Bhagavad Gita, and next chapter starts Bhakti Yoga part. And what Bhakti Yoga starts with chapter 7, Vijnana Yoga. Vijnana is of course not just, general knowledge, but it's very specified knowledge of the Absolute. And what this chapter starts from? It starts from the description of Krishna's manifestations in this material world. Krishna is talking about himself now, how he is manifested in this world, and he starts with very basic explanation, very elementary explanation for elementary students. He explains how he is manifested through elements. Rasoham, Apsukantiya, Prabhasmi, etc. Yeah, so he is explaining how he is manifested through Bhumira, Ponalove, etc. Then of course question may come again, why do we need to know how Krishna manifested in everything around us? Answer is very simple. Because everything is connected to Krishna, but it is not utilized now for Krishna. And so, first benefit of course, if you understand, if you see how everything is connected to Krishna, it will help you to remember Krishna. You drink water, you remember Krishna. You see light, you see the sun, you remember Krishna. It will help you to remember Krishna, but our remembrance of Krishna, Srila Prabhupada explains, is different from impersonal remembrance of Krishna. Impersonal just acknowledges, okay, this is connected to God, this is connected to God, but Vaishnava remembrance is not passive, it is active. What does it mean? It means that not only we remember that it is connected to Krishna, but
We use it.
yes, we utilize it for Krishna. It's Yukta Vairagya. Bring it back to Krishna. Bring it back to the original owner. And then we may ask, okay, how will it help us? Then chapter 8 says, explains Taraka Brahma Yoga. Tara means deliverance, and Brahma means spiritual. So it's literally translates as yoga of spiritual deliverance. We're becoming delivered from this material world, checking out from this material world, and going into the spiritual world, attaining the Supreme, as Prabhupada translates it. And so this is how chapters 7 and 8 connected to each other. If you realize that everything's connected to Krishna and you remember Krishna, about Krishna actively by using everything in his service, then remembering Krishna throughout your life will also help you to remember about Krishna at the time of death. And then by remembering Krishna at the time of death, you go to Krishna. That's very simple. And then by going to Krishna, you can understand very confidential things connected to Krishna, which are described in the next chapter, Rajaguhya Yoga, the most confidential knowledge And what is the most confidential knowledge? If you analyze the chapter, the most confidential aspects are loving relationship between Krishna and his devotees. And certain points in this chapter are so confidential that even for us, practicing devotees, it's pretty hard. We can understand it, but to accept it, it's a different matter. For example, verses 30 and 31, if you look at those, Krishna says that my devotee, even if he is sudurachar, even if his behavior is, completely off the wall, completely unacceptable, but if he is worshipping me, you must accept him as sadhu. Well, that's pretty hard for us. Why? In next verse, Krishna explains, Shipram Bhavati Dharmatma Sasvachakti. He says, because he will become very quickly righteous. Basically, you don't have to worry about his problems, I'll take care of that. You just accept him as sadhu, that's it. So, yeah. And there are many, many confidential points in this chapter, of course. For example, you can just please Krishna by offering him, little water or fruit or etc. But there is something which is very, very confidential, which is described in this chapter, and it's confirmed by Srila Prabhupada in two references in Nectar of Devotion and Nectar of Instruction. Krishna is glorifying his most confidential devotee in this chapter. Who is the most confidential devotee of Krishna? Srimati Radharani. Anyone knows what is the verse which glorifies Srimati Radharani in chapter 9? Directly. He glorifies Radharani. I mean, he doesn't use her name, but he refers to her directly, pretty much. Okay. I'm sure you don't have that in your hand now, so you may take a note. It's chapter 9, verse 13. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivi prakriti mashrita. Krishna says, great souls, Mahatmas, they take shelter in, doesn't even say in me, he says in my daivi prakriti, divine nature. What is that divine nature? Prabhupada says this is Radharani. So he glorifies, in effect, he glorifies Radharani as more important than him. He says great souls take shelter in her. So this is very high glorification. That's why Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna is always thinking of Radharani, even if he's sitting next to Arjuna in the battlefield and the chariot. So then, chapter 10, Krishna has already explained the most confidential knowledge, and chapter 10 starts with amazing statement. Krishna says, listen, O Arjuna, I will explain you the knowledge which is even better than what you heard before. It's a little confusing. He already explained the most confidential knowledge. What can be better? Right? But it's very simple from Krishna's point of view, because he just wants to elaborate on what he already explained in chapter 9. And in chapter 9, he explained, for example, like one very confidential thing. He mentioned in the last verse of chapter 9, very famous verse, Man manabhava man bhakto maniji man namaskuru, man bhavaishyasi. So he says, focus your mind and intelligence on me, worship me, become my devotee, surely you will come to me in this way. Then you will find Chatur Shloki in chapter 10, 4 verses which elaborate that explanation of entire process of devotional service, Sambandha, Videya and Prayojana in a nutshell. So he, unpacks that statement in Chatur Shloki. Because least according to Vishwanath Chakravarti, that Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo is Sambandha. Then next verse, Machita Madgata Pranay is Avideya, and the last two verses of Prayojana. And then he also elaborates on his opulences. This is, by the way, a very interesting subject. Krishna always talks about himself, right? You know, like I came across one kind of quote from some famous man, whoever he is, I can't really remember. He says, you know, why God always wants to be glorified? If he is already God, right? And if you read Bhagavad Gita, it seems like that Krishna always talks, I'm this, I'm that, and you know, like, and it doesn't seem to be very humble, right? Actually, you know, one of my friends before, when I was a teenager, he was a kind of very learned and from very, you know, like upper class. He was the son of a minister and etc. And I brought Bhagavad Gita to him, and I was surprised to learn that he never saw this book before. And I explained to him, and he was very impressed, and he was looking through Bhagavad Gita, and then he started coming through these statements. Krishna says, I'm this, I'm that. And he looked through it and he says, who is that Krishna anyway? And I said, you know, Krishna is the Supreme Lord. And he said, and then he did something we could not even imagine him doing at all. He used swearing language. And, you know, his image immediately dropped, you know, in the eyes of his friends, including myself. His image immediately went down to zero. He started using swearing language, and he said, if this is God, can't he be more humble? Like that. And later, you know, I learned, of course, I never wanted to deal with him since then, but later I learned, you know, that this envy is sitting right deep in the heart, and he managed to show such a high manners, you know, he was like the top aristocracy guy, of course, you know, coming from such a fluent family, but then, you know, when he faced Krishna, immediately, you know, his true colors just came, you know, like, showed up. Anyway, but, you know, like, even we read Bhagavad Gita, and we may also ask ourselves this question, why Krishna is always talking about himself? Well, explanation is there, actually, in chapter 15, where Krishna is kind of concluding describing his opulences, and basically if you read through these verses, we won't have time to discuss this today, but these are amazing verses, and the idea is that Krishna is actually saying that I am completely selfless in taking care of all and fulfilling everybody's desire, and I want absolutely nothing. I'm just doing it out of pure love, pure and selfless love towards the living entities, and that's why I'm glorified as the greatest. Because my love is completely pure and completely selfless. I want nothing in return. Even atheists, I'll look after them. I'll, you know, take complete care of them, no matter they blaspheme me or whatever. And so he doesn't say about that, but if you look through these verses, you know, it becomes obvious that he is taking care of everyone, no exceptions. And you know, he elaborates on his opulences, like, for example, from chapter 7 and 9, Krishna is talking about how he manifested, you know, Aham Varsha Prabhu Shakshi Vasa Sharanam Surit. He says, I am the master, I am the guardian, I'm this and that, I'm the bold refuge. And but then in chapter 10, he elaborates on his opulences, giving very graphical examples of the mountains and Himalaya, this and that. And one example he gives is of the fishes and the shark. And you know, just taking that example, we can look into it, why Krishna is saying that of the fishes and the shark. How shark is representing God in this world. Why shark? Why not whale? Why whale seems to be bigger fish than shark. Why shark specifically? But yeah, there are many reasons for that, and one reason is that, for example, some atheist is going to the beach in Sydney. I'm sure you have some good beaches around here, and having a good swim in the ocean, and then he's seeing something moving towards him in the water. He's seeing that, black fin coming closer, and he recognizes, oh my God, this is a shark. And then this atheist, what he will say, oh my God. He will recognize Krishna. So there are many, very wonderful examples Krishna is giving, illustrating his opulences in this world. And then, of course, after such a colorful explanation, Arjuna being naturally, curious Kshatriya. Kshatriyas are known to be curious because they have to make sure that nothing's happening outside of their control. And so he wants to see all these things. And then in the beginning of the 11th chapter, he says, Krishna, the 11th chapter is Vishwarup Darshan Yoga, universal forms. He says, Krishna, can I see all these amazing manifestations of yours you just described? And Krishna says, sure, I'll show this to you. I'll give you divine eyes. But, of course, one reason is that Krishna wants to show his divine manifestation, but there is one practical reason, because the purpose why Krishna is talking the entire Bhagavad Gita, we must remember, and this is chapter 3, that Srila Prabhupada says that 3:30, wherein Krishna tells Arjuna, you fight, I want you to fight. This is the purpose verse of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is very clear about explaining his purpose. And he wants to achieve that purpose. And within the display of universal form, he shows Arjuna something which will make him completely convinced that he will emerge successful or victorious. What is he showing?
And all the people are going inside his mind.
Yeah, that all his enemies are dead. And then, of course, Arjuna is asking, who are you? It's very interesting, at least in Bhagavad Gita also, because Krishna already explained to Arjuna that I'm the Supreme Lord. Arjuna didn't even respond. That's interesting. They just carried on the conversation, but when it comes to chapter 11, Arjuna is asking, who are you? He realized, okay, Krishna is God. Because there are so many gods, and Arjuna knew so many gods. He is the son of God, son of Lord Shiva, and he knew many gods, and he was even fighting with gods, like he was, he's the son of Indra, but he was fighting with Shiva. So, he was always surrounded by gods, and then Krishna is declaring, I am God. Arjuna says, okay, what else you want to say? He doesn't take much notice of that, but when he sees the scale of divine manifestation of Krishna, then he realized, okay, that's not exactly the gods I knew. He is much greater than all of them. Anyway, so then Krishna is helping Arjuna to realize his mission. So chapter 11, even though it's not very philosophical, it's a chapter of empowerment. Krishna is empowering Arjuna. Nimitta matra bhava sarisachin. You become an instrument in my hands. And then how many of you want to be empowered by the Supreme Lord? So what do we need? The last verse of chapter 11 is the verse which is defined by Srila Prabhupada as the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And go look into that. It gives 5 very important conditions which everyone has to fulfill in order to come to Krishna. And then chapter 12, Krishna is summarizing Bhakti Yoga part. That's why chapter is entitled Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, very straightforward, very short chapter. And it explains what are the levels of devotion and what are the qualities of devotee also. And then from chapter 13 onwards, until chapter 17, he's explaining Jnana Yoga part in Bhagavad Gita. And it's not very complicated actually. If you look at the chapter 13, the title of chapter 13, Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga, Prakriti is nature, Purusha is enjoyer. There are two kinds of enjoyers. What are the two kinds of enjoyers? Individual soul and the Supreme Soul. Individual soul is fake enjoyer, Supreme Soul is the real enjoyer. And that's, Viveka means discrimination, and or Vibhava, same thing. You will see that this word is recurring in Sanskrit titles. Then Prabhupada explains that three topics are explained in that chapter. Nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. What are the three main topics out of 5 of Bhagavad Gita? Anyone remembers? Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. So this Jnana Yoga part starts with the explanation of interaction between Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. It explains how Jiva becomes conditioned by Prakriti and what is the role of Ishvara in the entire equation. Yeah. Then, again, being a perfect teacher, Krishna explains all the three topics one at a time. And I'm sure you can figure it out. What is the main subject of chapter 14, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the three modes of material nature? Prakriti, yes. Chapter 15, Purushottama Yoga, Yoga of the Supreme Person. Ishvara, yeah. And chapter 16, Daivasura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga, divine and demonic natures. Jiva, yes. And then he concludes the Jnana Yoga part by explaining Shatatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the divisions of faith. Basically, in this chapter, he explains that human being, what is faith? He doesn't say like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, this and that. He explains the principles that faith means 3 types of activities. What are the 3 types of activities which make one faithful? Rightfully make one faithful. Austerity, sacrifice, and charity. Yeah. And so, yagya, dana, and tapa, this is what constitutes faith. And then, if this is faith in the Supreme, they bring permanent results rather than temporary in case of other types of faiths, according to the different modes. And then in chapter 18, he just highlights the main points of Bhagavad Gita. Moksha Yoga, conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. Moksha is, of course, liberation or freedom. This is the chapter of freedom, yoga of freedom. So, and who becomes free and from what in this chapter? Arjuna. What Arjuna becomes free from? From illusions and doubts. And now he is ready to act fully under Krishna's directions. I'm really sorry that we're running a little late, but I'm sure we can finish it up in another 5 or so minutes. We just have only 12 verses to look into. So, these are key verses of Bhagavad Gita according to the notes Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport to the verses. Besides Chaturshloki, but Chaturshloki is known as 4 verses in chapter, and they are known for their significance, but not these verses so much. So this verse, 330, is defined by Srila Prabhupada as the verse which explains the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. So let's chant the Sanskrit in unison and then look why it is the purpose verse. Mai sarvani karmani sannyasya jnana nirashya mamo buddha yadhyasva vigatara. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works and to me with full knowledge of me without desires for profit, with no claims of proprietorship and free from that you fight. So the purpose is very clear, fight. Now, Krishna wants Arjuna to fight, and Srila Prabhupada, as Krishna's representative, he also wants us to fight. We're not using the physical weapons, not that Shastra, Nana Shastra Paraharana, like Bhagavad Gita says, so many warriors came with so many Shastras in hands, so many weapons in hands. We have different shastra we are using, which is Bhakti Shastra. We are using transcendental knowledge. This is our weapon. And in the end of chapter 4, Krishna says the same thing. Armed with knowledge, that with the weapon of knowledge you destroy ignorance. So this is our Kurukshetra. That we have to destroy ignorance within our own hearts and help other people also. In that sense, help them to remove their ignorance from their heart. Of course, we have to be expert physicians first. Make sure you kill the disease, not the patient. Yeah, but this is why we are learning this so elaborately. And so, how many of you want to successfully fight on Krishna's behalf and help Krishna to remove the ignorance in the world? So yes, let's see, because this verse, it can also be looked at as a formula. Let's see what Krishna says in here. So first, he says, what do you need for that? First point is Mayi Sarvani Karmani. Dedicate all your activities unto me. Mayi Sarvani Karmani. Then, this is what we have to do. And anyway, no, we'll start from the bottom. So Krishna says Yudhyasva. Yudhyasva means fight. How do we have to fight? Vigadajvaraha. What does it mean? Become free from lethargy. So lethargy belongs to which mode of nature? Ignorance. So ignorance have to be removed altogether. No ignorance. It's counterproductive. Then one line above, Nirasha nirmamo bhutva, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship. Desire for profit and proprietorship, which mode of nature is that? Passion. Yes, passion has to be removed. It's counterproductive. Then, Adhyatma Chetasa. Adhyatma Chetasa means with full knowledge of me. So Krishna says, with full knowledge of me. Knowledge belongs to which mode? So, goodness is helpful. And then the topmost level is Mayi Sarvani Karmani Samyasa. Now you renounce. In which way? Dedicate every activity in my favor. Instead of doing things for yourself, do things for me. This is real renunciation. And this is the formula of success, we can say. And what will be the result? Will become perfect instrument in Krishna's hands in the same way as we see. Arjuna became perfect instrument in this picture. Yeah? Became one with Krishna in purpose. Different as person, but one in purpose. That's what Srila Prabhupada explains. Now, key verses of, 4 seed verses of Bhagavad Gita, as we mentioned in chapter 10, verses 8 through 11, describing the entire process of devotional service. Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. I'm sure you're all familiar with the terms. Yes? Those who are not familiar, you can ask someone who is familiar. And now we'll look into the verses and see what they talk about. So Krishna says in 10:8, I am the source of all spiritual and material goods. Everything emanates from me. Now, the wise who perfectly know this, so it talks about knowledge, yeah? That's why it's Sambandha verse. Engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Okay? So this is the Sambandha verse of Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Abhideya verse. What do we do? The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Smarana, thinking about this. Their lives are fully devoted to my service. Padasevana, Atma Nivedana. They derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So we can see that the samples of Navavida Bhakti are given in here, in this verse. So that's why Vishwanath Chakravarti says it's Abhideya. Then what will be the result? Prayojana. to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love. I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So Krishna will give us buddhi yoga, spiritual intelligence. To show them special mercy, I dwelling in their hearts. Destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So Krishna will also remove the ignorance from the heart. So this is Krishna's response, we can say, to our surrender.
Yeah.
And then the last key verse is the verse which Srila Prabhupada defined as the essence of Bhagavad Gita, 1155. That's also in the handouts. Let's chant this verse together. Mat karma krit mat paramo mat bhakta sangha jita varnasya sarvabhuteshu yasamamiti panava. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contamination of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of life, and who is granted to every living being, he certainly comes to me. So, Srila Prabhupada says that everyone who wants to come to Krishna has to follow this formula very precisely. What is the formula? First element of the formula, again, Mat Karma Krit. Dedicate all the activities to Krishna. Then Mat Paramo. Make Krishna the goal of your life. Then, these things, why Krishna says Mat Paramo? Because if somebody dedicated all activities to Krishna, then obviously one is focused on Krishna as the goal. Not necessarily, because if you dedicate all your activities to Krishna, then so many nice results are coming. And it's easy to forget Krishna and start enjoying byproducts of bhakti. And then Krishna says, okay, you engage yourself in my services, but make sure you also remember me. That I am the goal, not position or anything else. And how do you do that? By, Mat Karma Krit means you work for Krishna, do practical things for Krishna. Mat Paramo means sadhana, very strict sadhana. Then Mat Bhakta, become my devotee. And what is the meaning of Mat Bhakta will be explained in chapter 12. So many qualities of Mat Bhakta will be described. Who is devotee, whom Krishna considers to be his devotee. Then Sanghavarjita means basically avoiding association, avoiding contact with what? Free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation. So Prabhupada brings up these 2 points which are very detrimental in development of bhakti. That's karma and jnana. What's wrong with karma and jnana? Well, karma is meant for sense gratification, right? This is why people work, to make money, to enjoy senses. That's clear. Instead of karma, we have to do karma yoga, dedicate our activities to Krishna. But jnana, what jnana is meant for? Jnana is meant for control. And control is even worse than sense gratification. It has to be avoided, so that's why these are the 2 stumbling blocks. And then the last one, but not the least, is Nirvaira Sarvabhuteshu. Be friendly to every living being. And so Prabhupada is showing a very nice example how to be friendly to everyone with no discrimination. And this quality is again the first one which is described in chapter 12, Aveshta Sarvabhutanam. Okay, and the last point in our presentation is those important statements in Bhagavad Gita which are repeated verbatim, half verses, and that's in your handout, so you don't have to write it down, but we'll just look at these repeated statements, why they are repeated and how they are connected to each other. First one is in chapters 3 and 4, Mamavat Manuvatpante Manusha Sarvasha. Everyone follows my path in all respects, the son of Pritha. Basically, it's referring to the unchangeable universal laws established by the Supreme Law, by the Supreme Lord. That's supposed to show the Milk Way, but I'm not sure what it is, but anyway, universe basically speaking here. You know, Milk Way was supposed to represent that eternal path established by the Supreme. Yeah, Krishna is setting the path for everyone. So the laws are there for all, and we have only two choices, whether to break or to follow the laws, and if we break them, we suffer. If we follow, we get benefit. Yeah. So then Krishna says in chapters 3 and 18, chapter 18 again, he is highlighting very important point. Shriyan Swadharma Vilnan Paradharmat Svanushtita, it's far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultly, than another's duties perfectly. So Krishna is establishing the social body, structure for the social body, and everyone has certain duties to perform. And if you perform those duties nicely, you will get very nice results. But if you perform those duties not only nicely, but dedicate them to Krishna, then you will become pure. That purification of the heart will be the result. And then, if we do that, then the third and the foremost repeated statement in Bhagavad Gita will be very easy to follow. That is, Man manava man bhakto madhya man namaskuru mam bhagaishyasi. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. That's the very verse we mentioned, which is the explanation of Sambandha, Videya and Prayojana in a nutshell. Manmana is Sambandha, Mad Bhakto. Now, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto, that's Sambandha. Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, that's Abhideya. And Mam Evaishyasi, that's Prayojana. And if we follow our duties perfectly in this material world and our heart is purified, then it will be very easy with pure heart to be engaged in devotional service and develop our relationship with Krishna, and eventually go back home to the spiritual world to live with Krishna very happily forever ever after, which is the goal of Bhagavad Gita and the goal of devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope it was not boring. I hope you gained something, at least, for yourself. I mean, I'm sure all of you are knowledgeable people, and many points were those points which you already knew about, but just out of curiosity, how many of you learned something in this 1.5 hours? Something you haven't heard or thought before or haven't noticed in Bhagavad Gita before, please raise your hands. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So, and how many of you have now the complete picture of Bhagavad Gita? Okay, good. Thank you. All right, I wish you all the best, and yeah, we'll finish here. If Vijay Prabhu wants to say a few words.
I'd like to thank His Grace Uttama Sloka Prabhu. Uttama Sloka Prabhu ki Jai! Please give him a big hand of I couldn't believe that you can summarize in 1.5 hours. I thought when I was coming in the car, I was saying 1.5. I'm sure it'll be 2 hours. But he actually did it, so it's really, really amazing. It's the short time to cover. It's very, very helpful for us. And thank you for taking all the austerity to come all the way from North Sydney here and help us in our study of Bhagavad Gita and encouraging us. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. If we can, I can get from your email for them. The Word document I can send out, hand out, I have got soft copy. This one I don't have. So I will send out the PowerPoint as well and the Word document. You can use that for, we'll think of using that for intro programs, because before we do Bhakti Bhakti introductory program, we might use this model. I think it will be a lot useful. People will like it more. So we'll discuss that in the next leadership meeting tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much. Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Radha Gopinath ki Jai. Hare Krishna. And before we finish, I'd like to also thank Anand Prabhu and Shri Guru Bhakti Mataji for once again hosting this program and hosting so many devotees. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for your time and patience. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Sumar. Please stay here. We have Vijay Gopesh Prabhu's birthday and Achut's birthday happened last week. So we'll be here to celebrate. Yesterday, today, right?